When I think of my nostalgia for Persona 5, I remember really enjoying the user interface and the music. Those aspects provide a lot of unique charm to the game and really helped it stand afloat for a good period of time because unfortunately, I do also think back to the game overstaying its welcome. And after rewatching my playthrough, I've decided to place it behind Trails of Cold Steel 2. Here's why. While playing through the game, I definitely needed to acclimate to the Persona style. It had a strong emphasis on social activities, and when it didn't, there was a strong emphasis on dungeon delving. The game seemed to have its priorities correctly allocated, and I grew accustomed to the systems after a short while. The combat also had a unique flair to it with the one more opportunities in the all-out attacks, and it was cool being able to recruit new personas. Hanging out with the confidants turned into one of the activities that I enjoyed the most, as I was very interested in ranking up the people who I thought were the most interesting. With that said, however, there was one thing that really stuck out to me while playing through the game, and it was the story, or rather lack thereof. I remarked how I felt Kamoshida's Palace was a great introduction to the game, the world, and the systems, and the characters, but some focus was lost after that. They didn't build up to a plot by revealing a central villain with our goal to take them down, but instead introduced multiple villains across seemingly unrelated events as they occurred. By Madarame's palace, I already expressed concerns over the palace formula and how many times it would have to be interacted with. I already recognized that the outline of palaces as currently presented would prove to be an issue for me if they continued, and they did. At the end of Futaba's palace, which was about 50 hours into the game, I remarked again on the lack of story and its progression happening too slowly. It wasn't until 65 hours into the game where a narrative was actually coming together, but by that point, I had basically given up interest in it. For the gameplay, I also expressed disappointment with features like the third eye not being a toggle or automatically activated, as they made searching around more tedious than I felt it needed to be. I was also annoyed with Morgana constantly telling me what I could and couldn't do, which ultimately just created confusion and frustration about what I'm allowed to do at any given time. Guns felt incredibly weak and ultimately a waste of money, as their damage felt insignificant and their usage sparse, and my ability to see how close I was to ranking up social stats like guts or knowledge also weighed on me, as I enjoyed seeing progress towards a goal. In my final thoughts, I ultimately felt that both Madarame and Kanashiro's palace should have been cut at minimum. While I did enjoy the combat, as well as the majority of the characters, it felt to me that the game strung me along for too long, and by the time plot did happen, I was already pushing to the end of the game as quickly as possible. And to add insult to injury, requiring me to go through mementos for the final stretch hurt my perception of the game a great deal. For the rewatch, I actually felt like my nostalgia might have been mistaken. I witnessed myself enjoying the game far more than I thought, but the warning signs definitely popped up over and over again. The annoyance due to the palace being too long, or the hoops I needed to jump through to accomplish something. It was slowly wearing me down, and I could tell. I also found myself agreeing with my past self at nearly every juncture. However it's supposed to be construed, it feels like there is no story for an absurdly long time. Sure, we're witnessing character growth, world building, and progression, but there's no sense of narrative to me. Running around as the Phantom Thieves and changing bad people's hearts wasn't the story. Uncovering that an evil politician is manipulating people and we're the only ones that can stop him is the story. It taking more than 60 hours to reach that revelation so that our goals can be created and our course set is pretty insane. Most games out there would have put the cap on the story with finishing touches, or ended hours ago. I also couldn't help but feel there are a lot of moments where the game wastes your time, which I'm placing air quotes around. The game gives you a time limit to enter a palace and complete it, but before and after completing them is effectively empty space. Ranking up confidants is contingent on a ton of factors and may not even be possible in the moments you want. There were many times where I felt the game would have benefited if it continued the story immediately instead of letting the remaining days play out. Based on memory, I ranked Persona 5 at 66 out of 117, and I can see it around that spot. I enjoyed the combat, the persona crafting, and even various aspects of the day-to-day gameplay, but I also prefer that if you're going to put emphasis on your story, I'd rather see it front and center. This game had many little things to weigh it down, like if Joker dies, it's game over, or Morgana constantly telling me what I can and can't do, and the third eye just getting in the way. It also had big things that created a lot of problems, such as forcing me to finish mementos, which will never not be crazy to me, or having 7 palaces plus the endgame stretch that dragged on too long, and my issues with the story's revelation all heavily weighed down on me. The characters were great, and being able to spend time with those characters was great, but much of the in-between wasn't. General navigation into palaces, the tried and true formula of enter palace, find treasure, send calling card, and then kill the boss could have been switched up at least a couple of times beyond the Akechi reveal. So with all of that said, I think Persona 5 comes up behind Trails of Cold Steel 2. The defining factor here is that even though I had my issues with Ni no Kuni Wrath of the White Witch and Trails of Cold Steel 2, they were both games that I played twice and I enjoyed both playthroughs. For Persona 5, I had my issues with it for a long time and those things stayed with me, which were ultimately repeated for the rewatch experience.